Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Silk Road Nexus Conversations. Uh, I'm here today with Ben. He is the CTO at Arkestro. Arkestro is a native procurement AI solution, and Ben will talk a little bit more about that in details. But the story is, I was supposed to meet with Ben at Manifest, which happened in Vegas in 2026, but unfortunately, due to clashing schedules, we were not able to do that. And I'm thankful Ben is here. He gave me additional time to kind of record this and work with him. So thank you, Ben. If you could quickly introduce about yourself and Arkestro.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's a pleasure to be here. Yeah, Manifest was a blur, and I know we both had pretty busy schedules, so I was sorry we couldn't connect there, but making up for lost time now. But yeah, just a little bit about me. So I'm Ben. I'm the Chief Technology Officer over at Arkestro. We are the only predictive procurement platform working with enterprise procurement teams to uh, improve their operations and ultimately, drive them towards better outcomes unlocked by AI and behavioral science. So that's a bit on what we do. But my background, I'm a technologist by trade and education, degree in computer science. I think the through line on my career has always been um, uh, a passion for bringing technology to the masses, and particularly to underserved markets. Like as a high schooler, I had a business teaching people basic technology skills, how to use computers, how to get on the internet. Um, Prior to Arkestro, I was at a company called SurveyMonkey, which is kind of famously known for the direct to consumer, freemium business model, kind of bringing market research and research technology to the masses. That was a great kind of formative experience for me there too. But at Arkestro, which we began as a company called BitOps, I like to joke that Arkestro is and BitOps were my first procurement jobs, and I was introduced to the space by our founder Edmund Zagrin, who uh, uh, is a procurement practitioner and spent a number of years in the industry and really opened my eyes to this underserved um, area, and business function that every business has, that for a variety of reasons was had been kind of left out in the cold. Back then, this was 2017, 2018, left out in the cold from the machine learning and big data boom. And I think seeing just the opportunity to really transform an industry and a business function got me really excited and brought me here. And that's uh, if anything, I'm much more excited now even than I was then, because I think the opportunity has proven to be even more significant than I thought it was.
No, thank you. That was a great introduction. Before we jump in, I think one thing that you mentioned, Orchestra was bid ops before it became Orchestro. Can you tell us a little bit about bid ops and procurement? You also mentioned that there were some underserved needs in that procurement market. Uh, and then how did the pivot happen to Orchestra?
Yeah, that's a great question. So yeah, um, the seed, the idea for BidOps was born out of Edmund's experience working in competitive bidding processes and running actually reverse auctions as a practitioner for many years, and just seeing that that there was a huge opportunity there to uh, improve the outcomes of those processes and the efficiency. So like we really started BidOps as a bid optimization software. Um, that was our original focus. What we our first really core learning was that eventually became the foundation of predictive procurement, is that there's a uh, in procurement, like leveraging uh, being able to predict the outcome of a process, which really talented seasoned procurement veterans can kind of intuitively do, right? Folks who run a lot of reverse auctions, who run a lot of quoting processes, kind of have a sense before they even go in and run the event of how the event is going to end up, right? Things like supplier preference, knowing who the incumbents are, how many folks are participating. Like you get this kind of like intrinsic knowledge, this like horse sense, if you will, of like how the event is going to run. Edmund saw this and asked, like, how do we build a product that enables, again, at the time, you know, uh, uh, procurement teams who want to run competitive bids to kind of ingrain all of that knowledge into the process and actually predict the outcome and then work backwards from that desired outcome um, to drive a shorter process and a better process. And so that was really bid ops. But once we discovered that lesson in competitive bidding, the story from there is that we unearthed the fact that this way of thinking, which again became predictive procurement, applies to procurement writ large, right? And that's the transition from bid ops to Arkestro was saying, hey, like if we take this initial innovation and this model set we built, dramatically expand it, there's a wider variety, a huge variety of use cases across the landscape of procurement that this way of looking at the world is relevant for. Again, this predicting the outcome and working backwards from that outcome to drive a better process. As the scope expanded and we had the chance to work with more customers and deliver a lot of wins to those customers, we started to see a kind of growing groundswell of momentum in the market. Made sense to rebrand the company to Arkestro, and around that same time, we were fortunate enough to get connected with Rob DeSantis, who is the other co-founder of Arkestro, who is a very well-known figure in both the technology space, but particularly procurement technology. He was one of the original founders of Ariba that became SAP Ariba, and Rob got a chance to see what we were doing at the time, got really excited to kind of to jump back into the procurement tech game after a few years off, working for LinkedIn and a number of well-known companies as a board member and investor. And Rob coming on board and bringing his immense go-to-market knowledge and kind of pairing that with our technological vision, I think really threw a lot of fuel on the fire and has carried us forward to where we are today.
That is a fascinating story and truly inspiring as well, with some well-known figures on the board as well as on the founding team. One thing, Ben, I would like to understand, if you could provide this to me with an example of a bidding process in procurement. And that is probably the reason I'm asking this is how I see procurement is, for example, Apple is making an iPhone. They have around 300 parts that they procure for making that iPhone. There could be multiple suppliers that could support the procurement of those parts. So you are bidding with each of these suppliers on the price, or are you bidding on different parts altogether? So can you give me like one example of how that breaks down in terms of bidding optimization?
Yeah, it's a great question. So what we offer our customers is it's a full horizontal procurement solution. So you can, I think, yes, the most common use case is a competitive bid. So think, an RFQ, a sourcing event where, yes, I'm either, in an NPI use case, a new product introduction use case, where I'm building something that new, I need to go out and secure contracts with a set of suppliers, and I want to ensure that the prices that I'm paying are competitive, but actually more important than that I'm getting the right quality and business requirements associated with every part that I'm buying. And so that's the role that Arkestro plays in that example. Is kind of managing that process. We're a platform. We sit in the middle. The procurement team initiates the demand request. We help them through a mix of our predictive models and platform capabilities, kind of massage that demand request into an optimal event. We facilitate, the supplier side interaction, so the recruiting the suppliers into the event, inviting them. The suppliers participate, either live in the platform or over email, using a kind of a magic link flow where they jump into the platform and can drag and drop in a spreadsheet or use the UI to submit their quote. That's the overall overall flow is the suppliers submit their quotes, they get feedback on those quotes, and we support the procurement team in arriving at an eventual award decision. So that's kind of the high level on the process. Where we are particularly unique is that at the outset of the demand request being received for procurement, we actually are able to go in using our technology and predict a suggested price for every single item that procurement team might be trying to buy. So using the Apple example, these could be, component parts. Using a services example, it could be, a set of rate cards and suggested rates. What's unique about Arkestro is that the approach that we take is identity agnostic. So we actually don't need to know what you're buying, and you don't need to have bought what you're buying before to use our technology and to get a credible suggested price. So that alone is really cool, but we take it a step further in taking that AI generated suggested price and putting it in front of the supplier. So the supplier, when they log into the platform, as opposed to the way that procurement traditionally works, which is, hey, I need a quote. Let me go out and ask 3 suppliers what I should pay for this thing that I'm trying to buy, and I have the suppliers tell me the price, and then I say, hey, this price is lower, this price is higher, this one meets my quality standards. That sort of process takes a lot of time. With Arkestro, by starting, again, short-circuiting that process, starting at the desired outcome and putting that desired outcome in front of the supplier, we're able to drive a better result. But we also, suppliers like it because we save them a lot of time. They have a better sense for where they stand and what the buyer's expectations are. And they can, of course, decide if they want to tweak the price, tweak the suggestion. But that use of, we call that the suggested price is an example of a smart default in a process. That has just a dramatic impact on, again, the amount of time the process takes and the overall end result.
Makes sense. And I think one part that I would like to double click on is the suggested price. If, for example, there are, let's say, 10 suppliers for one particular RFQ that has been released by the buyer, the suggested price is for the buyer as well as for the suppliers, right? It's for both. That if you're bidding for something and someone says $100, the other supplier says $98, someone says $110, you are basically telling them that our suggested price is, let's say, $101. So some people might be underbidding, some people might be overbidding on that contract. For the buyer, they have a genuine idea of like, okay, 101, but I have a quote of 98. So probably I can look at that buyer as well, which is below the suggested price. So then how does the equation actually fit over here? Because if the suggested price is for both the buyer and the seller, is the seller not going to adjust the price, and then basically you're reaching the average rather than kind of having that competitive process of someone undercutting each other?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and I think that gets at how we arrive at the price suggestion to begin with. Before the price is shown to any supplier, right? We surface it to the buyer first, and the input to the suggested price is one of the inputs is a baseline, right? This could be a last price paid. This could be a value pulled from an existing catalog. We've built functionality. We call this the intelligent counteroffer that can actually go out into market on the buyer's behalf and assess a competitive baseline price, essentially what this thing should cost. And in some cases, of course, like a should cost model is actually used to if the buyer has one of those, it is used to set the baseline. From there, the machine learning model that we built, the suggested price model, predicts a suggested discount off of that baseline. And that's really key. That's how first the buyer has the opportunity to tweak the suggested price, but the price suggestion ultimately is arrived at by looking at the competitive context of the event. So the model, in addition to looking at the baseline, is looking at the suppliers that are participating or planning to participate, and gauging an effective anchor based off of that competitive context. So some of this is relates to the way that the models actually work, but some of this is also process science, right? The order and the way in which this feedback is shown to the supplier. In our case, right, it's shown at the outset of the event. We have a pretty high confidence that price suggestion sits somewhere in what we call the zone of possible agreement, right, which is kind of the overlap of the supplier's possible price range and the buyer's desired price range. In some cases, right, the suggested price might be higher than one supplier is going to quote, lower than another, but we do a pretty effective job at creating it as a starting point. But it is just that. It's just a starting point, and from there, the game theoretic negotiation engine kicks in. So, and this gets into the game theory, which we'll talk a little bit more about later on. I'm sure we can dig into that. But that's the other really key piece of the platform, is the way that the negotiation experience actually interacts with suppliers and provides them line item level game theoretic feedback to coach them to a desired outcome. And right, sometimes that outcome changes based off of how suppliers react to that initial offer.
Makes sense. And I know you mentioned a little bit about the machine learning models that you have. Are these models in-house and you're training them on your own data, or is that like what is happening right now in the market is that models are primarily owned by hyperscalers and then you build applications on top of that? So what kind of model are you working with? Do you own these models, or are you building agents on top of these models that can help you do multiple stuff?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's of course one that we get a lot. I think there's the kind of like stereotypical "where's the AI" question, right? Like, an AI is kind of implicitly framed as it's one model, it's one entity. Um, that's not our reality, and that's also just not how we the version of thinking about AI that we found is right for our market space. We To answer your question directly, we use a variety of models. We have some trained in-house, some more classical analytical machine learning models, and as well as we're using the same set of generative AI foundational models that others are hosted off of Bedrock or OpenAI or Anthropic. So we do it all, but what we're really focused on is how do we apply the right form of artificial intelligence to the right business process, and particularly at the right point in the procurement team's workflow for it to drive maximal value. And I think that's really key, because there's a number of examples in procurement and outside of it where these generative models, these Claude or GPT wrapper type products, folks are kind of applying AI as a cure-all on often fairly broken processes, and procurement is full of those, right? There's looking back to the early 2000s, like most of the incumbent players in procurement, your Arebas, your Oracles, were really focused on digitizing physical processes. And the reality is many of those processes have not changed for at least 20 years, and in many cases longer. This is where with predictive procurement, we're focused both on applying AI, but fundamentally like creating and driving towards a transformed set of processes that drive better outcomes, right? You apply AI to a broken process, you're just making that broken
Gonna
process
get
run faster.
exactly.
So,
No,
yeah.
I think that's very interesting, because I think one part that I would again like to double click is that you said that you have your own models that you're training, and what has been your experience around the uh, the quality of the output? Because and the reason I ask that is it, are you training are you getting better outputs during pre-training or during inference? How are you matching pre-training and inference within Arkestro? The reason I ask that is the negotiated data that you're collecting, or the suggested price that you're building, is probably going to be highly sensitive to the customers you work with, and that kind of goes back into your pre-training models. But when you use your inference models, you probably can get better results in the real time. So that's the reason I'm asking this question.
I think the answer is it varies based off of the use case. And I think we've focused a lot on negotiation science here to start, what we call negotiation science, the suggested price, um, where the approach that we've taken to create the suggested pricing recommendation, uh, we don't see super wide variance across customers because of the way that we've designed that model. It's a behavioral model. Like we're really focused on training that model in such a way that it's looking at non-identifiable attributes of uh, the event and of the suppliers participating to make those recommendations, and it's predicting a discount. And that's like one of our core aha moments was saying, hey, like the set of training features that the set of features you can train a model on to drive, consistent discounting behavior across customers and across a variety of use cases is a different set than most people think, right? Many other price prediction models are centered around, an item entity resolution sort of approach.
Correct. Yeah.
We get around that by focusing more on supplier behavior and competitive context. Looking at the identity information, like a lot of that is encapsulated in the baselining process, right? So that works really well for us from an efficacy standpoint, but it also allows us to say, we haven't designed a system where we need to train a machine learning system on sensitive customer data, right? Like enterprise customers do not want their pricing data and their supplier identity data used to train, a large language model or really any sort of predictive model. And so that's the way that we've architected this thing is done in such a way that we can drive really powerful results without needing to leverage that confidential data, which is really important to our enterprise customers.
And I think that is so true, because I think the data is so sensitive that if you use it to train your models and you provide a suggested price based of that to their competitor, it becomes kind of challenging around losing the pricing advantage that they might have just because of their relationships with the vendors, etc. So I think it makes sense. And I think pivoting from here to learn a little bit more about the negotiation sciences, that is the one part that has fascinated me a lot about Arkestro as I started reading about it. And before I kind of ask my question, I'll just lay the premise of my understanding of negotiation. Negotiations are highly behavioral, right? I mean, it's based on relationships. It's based on your understanding of what the market is. It's also highly analytical in the sense that you have previous data that can lead you towards better price negotiations. Having said all of this, which is a behavioral context, the market context, and the analytical context, how does predictive negotiation or predictive procurement actually work? What is predictive negotiation? Like, how can you predict a negotiation?
Well, and I think to build on a lot of things you just said there, Nikhil, like the approach that we take at Arkestro is rooted in behavioral science, right? And we believe like there's we believe and we know that there is a ton of relevant information that suppliers kind of metaphorically throw off, right, as they and buyers as well as they go through a negotiation process. Everything from and we all kind of intrinsically know these things, right? Like the proximity to the end of a sales quarter, the emotional aspect of needing to get a deal closed, of understanding your leverage in the market, like all of these things matter a great deal when it comes to negotiation. And our platform is designed to capture these factors and leverage them into making better recommendations and decisions for procurement teams as well as for their suppliers. So we really see negotiation as a yes, an analytical art, but a human-driven
Process.
construct and process.
Yep.
Exactly. So that's really like when we talk about negotiation science, like we're really focused on modeling the strategic dynamics of a sourcing decision or any procurement decision, and looking at some of the factors I named in addition to just like digging into who is participating, how many suppliers are participating, understanding the supplier's market position, strategic motivations, and their kind of current and past behavioral data, like that, understanding that and then applying it and designing a process that maximizes, the shortens the distance to get to the desired outcome and drives focuses on the optimal outcome from the very beginning. Like that's fundamentally what negotiation science is all about. And I think there's parallels to draw. I think most of the major tech platforms that we all use every day, like are rooted in this way of looking at the world. You look at Meta, Google, like all of these major online advertising platforms. This is the premise that they're built on, right? That we can, by tracking clickstream data, tracking end user behavior, we can infer a lot about what someone is going to buy, what someone is going to do. That is essentially the core seed of what negotiation science is all about in our perspective on negotiation.
Okay, I'm going to take one example, and it's going to be a very generic example. And I think everyone probably has gone through this example or gone through this scenario. Everyone goes to buy a car, right? We all try to negotiate from the sticker price or the window price of the car. And I know it's going to be very simplistic in terms of the complex world that you deal with, but I think the principles could be similar.
Yeah.
So if I am going to buy a car, what should be my behavior? How would Arkestro guide me towards a negotiation strategy? What has worked for me is like how I remove the behavioral part of it is I don't deal with the dealership directly face to face. I deal with them either on email or over the phone during the negotiations, because then it keeps the emotions out of the conversation and you're not dealing with a person, you are replying to a message. So that has been my philosophy. It has worked. But how would Arkestro then guide me to a better deal working with a dealership?
Yeah, so I love that example because I think for one part, like the fact that part of what we do is drive a uniform process and optimize that process towards a more impartial medium, right? Like negotiating over the internet removes some of the in the case of buying a used car, maybe the intimidation factor, or the feeling that you're standing in this crowded or intimidating dealership and getting pitched. So we remove kind of the any competitive leverage related to the location or the context of negotiation. But the main area where Arkestro adds value in that example is arming you, the car buyer with a suggested price, right? Like you're coming into that negotiation knowing roughly what you should be paying. And that's, I think we all know, if you've ever, bought a used car or paid for some kind of service on Thumbtack, right? Had paid somebody to paint your house or mount your TV. Having an understanding of what the thing should cost is really powerful. And it's also super rare, right? Like we're all put in positions, procurement is put in these positions every day where they're asked to buy things that they're not experts on. Their job is to buy, but their job is not, there's no possible way that any procurement person could be a detailed subject matter expert on every single SKU. So that's really powerful. Again, being able to put a stake in the ground and know roughly what you should be paying. But on the other side of it, right, we would benefit the supplier, right, the used car salesman, with a feedback experience, right, a gentle, friendly kind of coaching experience to say, hey, like here are some levers you can pull, like for this person who's trying to buy your car. This specific feature of the car is really important to them, or hey, like they actually need being able to drive this car off the lot tomorrow is much more important, right? They're going to be game to negotiate if they can get access to this specific model sooner. So again, that is just an example of how these behavioral factors and an understanding of the participants and their desires and what the optimal outcome is, what a used car negotiation would look like to a procurement user would, and to a car seller would be, hey, like here's here's a suggested offer. If you meet this and you can meet these requirements, like you're going to have a sale today. And to the procurement user, or to the car buyer, it's confidence that you're getting what you want and that you're not, that you're paying a fair price.
Right. And I'm just going to ask a counter argument related to that, because when we talk about suggested price, how I look at suggested price is that it creates an anchor bias, meaning that I could have gotten a lower price, I could have gotten a higher price, irrespective. Now I'm anchored on that suggested price. From a behavioral psychology standpoint, my mind is now seeing $X as the right price, which could be wrong. At the end, it's the suggested price from the model. Is that a concern that you have seen, or have you faced from any of your customers, that they have stuck onto that price, which is now anchored on, but it could be wrong because it's kind of creating that bias in your head now?
Yes, that's a common question that we get from customers and from prospects when you're first introduced to the concept. The inclination to say, "Hey, what if the anchor price is wrong?" Is logically follows. I think what that largely boils down to in Arkestro is confidence in the baseline, right? Confidence in the baseline that either the last price I paid or the baseline that Arkestro has assisted me in setting, that baseline might be too high and might be getting ripped off. So yeah, super common pain point and question that we get. The way that we address that in Arkestro, and again, bringing it back to this used car example, is for these use cases, for these things I'm buying that I haven't bought before, making it really easy to get market data, right? To get a representative sample. In Arkestro, we call this the intelligent counteroffer, which goes out to market, identifies a set of relevant suppliers, and asks them for quotes before any negotiation begins. So in the used car example, right, it would be equivalent to going to CarMax or your Kelley Blue Book and pulling in an approximation of that price. It's actually a little bit better than that because the Arkestro intelligent counteroffer understands your business, understands the competitive context in which you operate, right? Like the companies that we work with these are large enterprises, think Fortune 500s, Chevron, Nissan. These companies procure on the scale of small countries, and they have like almost entire macroeconomic effects of their own, right? That's just like the scale at which they buy. And so building in an understanding of that into the intelligent counteroffer process allows those companies to derive a contextually relevant baseline for the thing that they buy, right? Like Nissan buying paint looks very different than, let's say, Rivian buying paint, right? They're both car companies, but comparing those two baselines is not actually going to tell you very much. So that's where our product is really focused, is how do we make it easy to get to a context relevant recommendation that you can trust and trust, quickly.
All right. Now, I think I'm going to switch and flip that example of car buying from car selling. The reason I want to do that is I want to now talk about game theory. And I've actually done that. So maybe it'll fit the discussion that we'll have around game theory. But the example is, now if I have to go sell my car, I go to 10 different dealers and get a quote from each one of them. What I've seen is CarMax quote is usually the highest in terms of the money that they offer, and the other dealerships offer lower money for that same car. But then if I have a CarMax quote, I can play the game theory thing where I can go to the other dealership and say, CarMax is offering this much. Are you willing to give me a lower price than this? Because I'm not going to sell it at the same price. If it's the same price, I can go to CarMax. So what's the benefit of working with you? 80% of the time, the dealership would give you $500 or $1,000 better deal compared to CarMax while buying your car. How does that game theory aspect be built through technology and present it to your customers? That is one thing that I want to understand. How does that game theory model really fit into predictive negotiations, predictive procurement, and how have you scaled it? Because every situation in game theory is different. How can you scale it as a technology?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think I'm thinking through how to apply this to the car buying example you just gave, but a lot of what you're describing there, like in Arkestro land, relates to the way that we actually design the game, that we design the process of negotiation, and the way in which game theory is applied to that largely relates to event design, right? So not just like which event to run, like RFQ, RFP, RFI, or spot buy, but how to actually tailor the feedback that suppliers receive at each step, each turn in the game. So I think the in the car buying example, the ability to take that, for the supplier to take the offer and shop it around, like the way that relates to Arkestro is we're very thoughtful about the types of feedback and competitive context that we offer suppliers and how we do that. One example of this is like what we found is revealing a given supplier's standing in the game, right? Where they stack up on an individual line item or in the event at large. There's big benefits and big potential drawbacks of associated with how that is done, right? A supplier, and when I say big benefits and drawbacks, I actually mean both, yes, to the procurement team, but actually to the supplier as well. A supplier who knows that they're in first place often takes their foot off the gas. They stop competing. They know that they've got the best offer. They know that they're going to win. And we've actually found telling suppliers they're in first place often causes them to lose, right? If there's another round of negotiation, they're going to, and there's a real chance that they get, their position gets usurped. It's not in the supplier's best interest to tell them that they're winning.
Yeah.
So that's I think one concrete example that I think relates to the example you gave of like the way in which game theory is applied allows for suppliers to exert their leverage, and we're thoughtful in applying it so that suppliers can understand where they have leverage, where they don't, and the same for buyers. And again, it's all in the interest of arriving at that optimal outcome within the zone of possible agreement for both parties.
Got it. Makes sense. And I think what you just mentioned over there is around the negotiation is not over until it's actually over. So even if you are the front runner in the first round of negotiations, you could lose in the second round. Could be on multiple factors. From there, I think what you have just described, I want to switch gears a little bit and talk a little bit more about how do customers get value. And I think you have already talked and touched upon two great points. One is the price, which is the suggested price is usually lower than what they would have paid. So there is an absolute value gain, an ROI emphasis that you can apply on day one once you have the suggested price in front of you, and you can benchmark against it as and compare your savings. The second you mentioned is the time that is saved in the negotiation process, which is like usually months, is now down to like days or even hours in some cases. What other benefits do you think the customers get from, or value customers generate from using Arkestro solutions? And if you want to double click on any of these examples of price and time, that is also great. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good summary you just gave. I think what's interesting, and I think that the common misconception of Arkestro is that it's all about saving money, right? And the competitive leverage that Arkestro provides. What the predominating way in which Arkestro provides value to our customers, perhaps surprisingly, is the time savings, right? And the ability, yes, to run shorter, more effective processes that drive consistent results. Another, like the way that we that this shows up for our customers is think of your most talented procurement folks. What if you could clone them? What if you could ensure that the minimum bar for all of your procurement activities is consistent with the output of your best people? That's ultimately what we provide. And so ultimately, what Arkestro is all about is allowing procurement teams to touch more spend, right? To actually get through their to-do list, to churn through their backlog, and drive better outcomes. And that relates to time savings, but it's really, this is what process transformation unlocks for our customers, is this ability to um, superpower and supercharge your procurement people. And we talk at Arkestro, this our vision we describe as continuous procurement, right? Like, how do you putting your procurement processes on into a kind of continuous cycle, moving from what are traditionally very episodic processes in procurement, right? I run my roughly annual sourcing event. Sometimes I don't run it. My plate is always overly full. There isn't enough time or enough people to do all of the things that procurement teams would like to do, and for procurement teams to really operate from a true strategic position. And that's this mindset shift that Arkestro allows our customers to get to, and this transformation that we facilitate is one in which you have these continuous cycles. Everything that you buy is consistently managed and monitored, so and surfaced to the procurement team when an intervention is necessary. Ultimately, humans are at the center of this process. We believe, and the product is built in such a way that it's centered around excellent
But
users orchestrating. But
isn't that if the process is centered around humans, then technology is basically replacing that human, right? Because now, at the end of the day, negotiation has been the art about building relationships which build forward leverage. So if you have been working with one company and they have been giving you a good price, now you lose that relationship. Is that something that customers have felt, or do you think that is going to be a problem where forward leverage that used to get generated through human to human relationships will now not be available, and everything will be so mechanical in terms of negotiation? And the beauty of negotiation was human relationship.
It's a great question. No, so we're big believers that great supply chains are built on great supplier relationships, and we are not here to replace your supplier relationships and that fundamentally human relationship that matters so much in to great supply chains and building great products and companies. And this is what I like. Ultimately, this cycle time compression, time savings, value add that we offer. The reality is that today procurement teams are not spending as much time as they'd like to be spending with their suppliers and building great supplier relationships. That's ultimately where Arkestro helps, is let's get the cruft, the busy work, the amount of time it takes to prepare for negotiation, to decide what process to run, to figure out the target price, to figure out the baseline. The reality is that, and not to mention just cutting POs and making sure that stuff shows up on the loading dock when it's supposed to. It's all of that stuff that occupies an inordinate amount of procurement time today. And we believe, right, with great software, that stuff becomes an implementation detail, and you bake in, the optimal outcomes into all of that stuff, so that procurement teams can ultimately be more, focus on the human element even more. And that's a radically different perspective than some of our competitors, for sure. But we think it's the right one, and I think that we've seen a lot of evidence, significant evidence so far that that it's the right approach.
Got it. And Ben, if you could walk us through, with a couple of customer journeys around how this process actually starts, what is the part of behavioral science and the negotiation that is getting automated, and how does that result in more time for the customer to spend with their suppliers to build that relationship? If you can walk us through one or two quick examples, that that might, help viewers understand a little bit more about the nuances of where the technology is actually applied.
Sure. Yeah, it's a great question. So, I mentioned a couple customers already. Chevron and Nissan are a couple of our notable lighthouse accounts. In the oil and gas, energy vertical, and automotive vertical. I think the story that we've seen, or the story that we've seen with both, uh, is they came to us with a problem set very similar to what I described earlier, right? We've got, too much spend, not enough time to address it all. Um, and, in Chevron's case, an awareness that like there were a number of specific use cases and verticals where, there was just not enough uh, people hours to stay on top of all of the procurement activity and to really to even in some cases negotiate it all. So there were POs going out the door that were just not negotiated whatsoever, and that's a very common story with Arkestro. Like in addition to our predictive procurement approach, the thing that sets us apart from the pack is customers can get started really quickly with us. We have this implementation methodology called Live in 5. It's exactly what it sounds like. It means like we can actually get a brand new customer onboarded and off to the races running events in just 5 days. And that's like looking at Chevron specifically, like they were able to run hundreds of millions through the platform in a very short period of time. And that has allowed them to, get their arms around, a much larger swath of spend and spend a lot less time managing each individual um, uh, process with each supplier. So they're seeing significant cycle time reduction that's allowed them to, um, do a whole number of different things. Address other categories. Focus, spend more time with their most strategic suppliers. Like really in I would say in broad strokes the story with all of our customers. Right there's a we approach these implementations focused on an area or set of areas where there's acute pain. And then as we progress, we kind of climb the ladder of use cases with the customer, and that's where the product really shines as well in terms of its flexibility and its horizontal application is the climbing the ladder with Arkestro. We're not just focused on a specific spend segment like MRO or tail spend, for example. Like with Arkestro, you've got this kind of broadly applicable tool set. Goes back to it's not just one form of AI. We're really focused on applying the right form of AI to the right business process. And so that's that ability to climb that ladder and add more spend and really kind of build the flywheel of value for that customer of accruing value is really strong and something we're super proud of.
Makes sense. And I think what I would like to also double click on in terms of value, and I think maybe I'm going back to this again, in terms of suggested price. Like if I were, and I also know that you said that it could not be the most important part of the value that Arkestro provides, but I think this is one of the more tangible and measurable outcomes that can be quickly measured in terms of the value gain from any platform, which is dollars. Uh, uh, if Can you give us or directional numbers, probably not the absolute numbers, but directional numbers in terms of how much savings, for example, a Chevron or a Nissan or any other customers have received because the suggested price that the model came up with was better than what they would have negotiated otherwise?
Sure. Yeah. No, on average, we're seeing it's typically somewhere in the range of 12 to 15%
Lower.
with those customers. Yeah. So it's a significant amount, wide range depending on the category as well. Like we often see outcomes significantly higher, but yeah, that's where we hang our hat as far as saving is concerned. And then in addition, cycle time reduction of typically on the order of like 3x what they've been spending.
And I think this kind of pivots me to one of the last sections that I want to talk to you about, the funding story, etc. But I think before I go into funding, a lot what goes into the cap table before any funding is decided is how much revenue can you generate and how will you pay back to the investors, right? And I think uh, for you, the revenue model, I believe, is going to be somewhere around the service based, as well as if you're taking a cut of the savings. I don't know if that is the revenue model, but can you give us a directional understanding of what your revenue and the business model is, and then take that to your funding story as well?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we try to keep our revenue model very simple and very aligned with, a win-win. For when the customer wins, we win. And so like a lot of other AI native companies, a consumption-based model is what we use. So, the more spend you manage with Arkestro, the more you pay us. Yeah, so from that,
So it's
very
basically
simple.
like a fee for service model, which is like the usage of the API. Is it like the token based model that AI companies use these days?
Very similar, very similar.
Okay.
We don't call it tokens exactly, but but yeah, it's a spend under management type of model.
Got it. Okay. Got it. And yeah, please take us to the funding story as well, and the evaluation story as well.
Yeah, for sure. So as you can imagine, I can't share a ton of details on the specifics there, but really excited by the momentum that we're seeing, in the market and particularly customers. But I think that in the same vein, the the investors are. There's a lot of investor attention on our customer right now, which we're really proud of. We're super proud and humbled by the collection of investors that we currently have. We've got an amazing board, an amazing set of pretty recognizable names there. I think headlined by NEA and Jeff Immelt, former CEO of GE, is sits on our board and is a tremendous strategic asset to the company. But yeah, I mean, we've there's a huge opportunity here for predictive procurement over the next, you know, even just 12 months and beyond. And we're um, uh, uh, really proud of our ability to deploy capital to meet the moment. So I think most recently we announced a $36 million strategic investment round led by Aramco Ventures. That was last summer, and yeah, there's a huge amount of momentum behind the company, and we're just a huge amount of demand for predictive procurement. So we're striving to meet the moment and excited to have a set of investors and just a very receptive market. I think there's we're this big moment that AI is having paired with the I think really dating since the pandemic, this focus on supply chain and procurement, and only made more relevant by all of the macro uncertainty around tariffs. Like it's a really uh, on the one hand tumultuous time, but a really uh, yeah, predictive procurement is incredibly relevant in the market right now, and that's something that we're excited about.
Sure. And one last question that I would like to end with is I know you have worked with big technology companies as well in the past. Uh, Working at Arkestro, what is the difference in terms of building technology for a startup that is getting started? And you have a variety of clients. So you're not focused on a specific industry and scaling in that industry. You have a breadth of clients and you're working across the industry. How messy it gets in terms of building and prioritizing technology? What is your mantra, and how are you making sure that your roadmap stays sane and does not ship features that you might not want to ship at certain point in time?
Yeah, it's such a good question, and I sure you can relate at your role at Wayfair that there's always like no matter what size you're at, there's always a challenge, balancing the various demands on the business. I think the way that we look at it at on the product team at Arkestro um, is, I mean, we're fundamentally a transformational technology company, and we're our ability to continue to chart a course for predictive procurement and to deliver game-changing new functionality. That's really core to what we do. But we pair that with the other equally relevant reality that we are serving enterprise customers. We take that job very seriously, and our investment in everything from security to compliance to quality. That's certainly something where we're always looking to raise the bar. And I think maybe getting to the root of your question, like looking at the company 7 years ago when we were bid ops versus now, like I think it's a increasing focus and need to focus on those sorts of capabilities that's risen on our roadmap to the point where it's at now, where we're serving again some of the largest companies in the world, and we're really proud of that. But they're ultimately signing up with us and counting on us to as a transformation partner and really a thought partner for how to thoughtfully apply AI and behavioral science in procurement. So always need to be pushing the envelope there, and yeah, we're really proud of that.
No, thank you, Ben. It was a fantastic conversation. I learned a lot, and thank you for taking up with my examples, which are not complicated, around car buying, and explaining the thought process behind Arkestro's science of negotiation and procurement. So really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks so much, Nikhil. Yeah, it's a pleasure, and pleasure meeting you, and just so impressed by what you've built with Silk Road Nexus, and excited to follow the progress.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.